again, it relates to the Water Authority on looking at the importance that the Suffolk County Water Authority has played over the last few decades in groundwater protection. That you directed me to work with Ray Corwin, God rest his soul, and we came up with these special groundwater protection areas. And we identified special groundwater protection areas, at least in Suffolk County, that the Water Authority could use as a guide to determine where it might make sense to put wells or to protect wellheads. And again, that happened under your watch. Congratulations to you, Pat. It's quite fitting that you're now the chair of the Water Authority. The county and the Water Authority have had a great collaborative, relationship to protect this resource. And now under your leadership and Jeff Szabo's and your entire team there, kudos to all of you. It's great that we have you guys there.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm glad you said it while I'm still alive. I'm not saving it for my eulogy, but thanks, Kevin. I want to get Jackie Gordon on. Jackie, you've had this incredible career. United States Army, U.S. Reserves, teacher, educator, town board member. So you get it. But when we first spoke, when you were coming on the board, you made a point to me about the importance of water and the role it played in various theaters that you were in when you were in the United States Army in places like Baghdad and Afghanistan and elsewhere. Talk to us about that.
Well, Pat, you're right. And first, just thank you for including me in this webinar. I'm the newest board member, and so I am the least experienced of all of you. So I am honored to be in your midst, and I'm just open to learn all I can and to become more knowledgeable as I remain on the board. But yes, Pat, we did talk about that on all my deployments and my entire time in the military. Water is important because just in training, right, you have to make sure that you have water to be able to sustain and be physically fit. But particularly while we were in Afghanistan, my unit had a mentorship role with 2 Afghan battalions. And so water became a huge part of our mission to provide water for these Afghan battalions. And the US military, us, taxpayers, ended up investing a huge amount of money in providing water in all capacities: drinking water, water for vegetation, for agriculture, water for just everyday use for Afghans. And it cost us a lot of money. By the time the end of my unit's rotation, we were actually building wells on the Afghan side because we realized how much money it was costing to pay for the water. So every day we had to monitor how much water was used. We had to anticipate how much water will be needed so that we knew how much water needed to be ordered. So water became very important. And so when I had this opportunity to be on the board, I kind of jumped at it because not that I didn't know how important water was before, but after that experience, it really came to the forefront of my mind how we really need to conserve, how important it is to conserve the water that we have.
We do take it for granted. I know we have some questions. Seth, why don't you pose 1 or 2 of them?
Absolutely. So Tom wants to know who is responsible for maintaining the recharge basins throughout Long Island.
We're going to get down to the nitty gritty. I'll save that. Let me go to Rob Calarco, who gets those calls from his constituents.
So multiple levels of government have recharge basins. They often are tied from different roads. So whether it's a state road, a county road, or local towns and villages, they often have a recharge basin, and each one is responsible for the maintenance and clearing out those recharge basins and taking care of them and making sure they stay tidy. And you do need to clean them out periodically because they will fill up with sediment and they'll stop functioning properly, and you need to get in there and do that work. Suffolk County, I know, has a pretty regular routine. Our Department of Public Works does a great job of getting out there with the equipment necessary to maintain our recharge basins. But to be quite honest, in local government, everything is local. And often as an elected official, we'll get calls from residents about a recharge basin. They'll have no idea who owns it. And we try to figure that out and sort it out for them and get in touch with the right level of government for whoever it is to get out there and maintain those. But
Well,
they're
that's part of the
important
job
because
description.
they're also critical to recharge of our water.
Yes.
Patrick,
And-
let me just say, I had to
Okay.
laugh when I read Tom's question because we get calls like that all the time too. And it really came to light back in 1999 with West Nile virus, because all of these recharge basins are filling up with stagnant water. They act as breeding grounds for mosquitoes. And, people are complaining about mosquito populations. So we had to try to find out who owns all these recharge basins, which, as, Presiding Officer Calarco said, they're supposed to be cleaned out because their job is not to hold water. Their job is to allow water to recharge the aquifer system. And the maintenance on them, depending on where you are, can be really good or really bad. And I agree with Tom. Some of them have trees coming out of them, and that's not good.
Okay, we're going to get off this topic quickly, but I have to ask Tim Kilcommons, is that a source of chloride, the salt that goes on roads that eventually could end up in our drinking water supply?
Yeah, it is, unfortunately. And we've actually seen that in wells that are adjacent to or in close proximity to recharge basins. And you can kind of track it with snowfall in the winter and how much salt is being applied to the roads. And actually, one of our lead hydrologists here, Ty Fuller, actually has done academic studies on that and actually received a master's on studying and being able to identify and fingerprint road salt versus the saltwater intrusion we talked about earlier.
Okay, interesting. Let me shift gears a little bit and talk about infrastructure, and I'm going to direct this to John Cameron. John, and we've all seen articles about Flint, Michigan, where they took a cheaper approach, thought they would find a better source or cheaper source of water from a river, and it ended up, creating all kinds of problems because the pH wasn't right and old lead pipes. And Tim Kilcommons can talk about that. But what happened was that it eroded all of the stuff that protected lead from leaching into a water supply. The Biden administration has said we're going to provide a lot of money for water infrastructure because in most communities across America, because it's below ground, people don't worry about it unless a pipe breaks out a water main problem and floods. So John, talk to us about what's going on and how all of us here on Long Island should be thinking about investing that infrastructure money that might be coming from Washington.
Pat, when we talk about infrastructure, typically people can relate to, the classic infrastructure or the old definition, as we say now, the what engineers and construction people call the classic definition of infrastructure, being water, wastewater, bridges, tunnels, roads, etc. But when it comes to water infrastructure, you have the distribution system, the supply system, et cetera. But you also have in some of the, if you will, some of the aging buildings. Again, Long Island being, the oldest suburb in the nation, we have some very aged infrastructure, and in particular Suffolk. And then the further you move out east, probably the newer it gets. But the older the infrastructure, you have a lot of the old pipes which need to be replaced, not just because of contamination issues, but also failure, et cetera. But you also have in some areas, in particular, like in the city, et cetera, where you may have housing projects where you could have soldered joints, you could have basically you could have decent quality coming into the building, and you could be contaminating it in the building, just as we've talked about. You could have asbestos in the building, you could have lead paint. You also could have old pipes that are in there that are actually water supply interior to the building. And so we believe we're going to see in the infrastructure bill, which could actually be coming out today. I don't know. We'll see in Washington. But hopefully it's going to deal with major infrastructure issues on water, on supply issues, as well as quality issues. You bring up Flint, Michigan, and how that was ignored, unfortunately. And we're fortunate to actually, two things. we're fortunate to have a finite water supply being beneath our ground. It's sole source, as opposed to you look and say we could have the Mississippi River. And, if you've seen the statistics that the people in New Orleans are actually drinking the water that has passed through nine intestines before it gets to them. It's kind of disquieting. But that's what happened is the one city's water supply is the city to the upstream's discharge from their sewage plant. So that's the reality. But for us here on Long Island, we have great soils which filter out a lot of particulate material, microbial material. But what it doesn't do, it doesn't filter out a lot of the chemicals, and that's
We're going
why
to talk about that. We're going to get into
talk about that. But I'm just saying
chemicals.
that is a major challenge for us here on Long Island because of many decades ago of industrial development, as well as also just even on-site systems, is those chemicals which are now leaching down to our water supply that actually the contamination occurred decades ago. But it's an issue we're going to have to deal with, is supply as well as quality.
Thanks, John. So Kevin, I want to get you back into this discussion because among all of your other responsibilities and boards you're on, you are the chair of the Governor's Regional Economic Development Council. And part of what you're charged with is to look at Long Island, Nassau, and Suffolk as a region and prioritize the investment of those billions of dollars of infrastructure money that you've been able to secure for Long Island from the state. How does Long Island go about, especially all the different water providers? Well, in Suffolk County, there are a handful of them, with Suffolk County Water Authority being by far the largest in Nassau County, and not have all of us competing against each other for those federal dollars?
Yeah, good question, Pat. Rob alluded to it before. Our environment is our economy out here in so many ways. And it's not just that we're surrounded by 1,000 acres of coastline, and our tourism industry is largely dependent upon our rivers, bays, oceans, and beaches and parks. But our groundwater is a critically important part of that economy as well. No business, a bad environment is a bad climate to do business in. And so that's why we have a pretty enlightened business community out here on Long Island that gets it, that you don't want to try to locate your business, grow your business, expand your business in an area that doesn't have a good environment. And a good, clean, healthy environment actually promotes a really good, strong economy. And so that's why it's important to, that the business, when I was running the business community, I worked with folks like Adrienne and Kevin and Dick and the others I mentioned before, because it's important for business and environmental groups to work together on protecting our environment. When it comes to state resources, we've actually been fortunate over the last 10 years under Governor Cuomo. He, in addition to the regional economic development councils, we were able to secure a $550 million pot of money for the Long Island economy. And John and I worked together on that, where we got monies allocated of $5 million to do this LINAP plan, Long Island Nitrogen Aquifer Protection Plan. And that money also came out of this economic development pot of money, because again, the state, the governor, and the Senate realized that protecting our environment would protect our economy. And so there is a lot of competition. The regional, the REDCs, we compete against the other 9 REDCs in the state for state monies. And then every state competes for federal monies. I think the important thing is at least it works at the state level. I believe it works at the federal level, is if you have a plan that you're trying to implement and execute, that helps attract dollars. The federal government, the state government, they don't want to be the first dollars in. They don't want to be the build it and they will come type of leaders in the effort. They want to complement efforts that are already underway, that are already part of a local or state plan, and then almost become like the last dollars in to bring either the plan over the finish line or bring the execution and implementation over the finish line. And so what's good about what the Suffolk County Water Authority does and what John does at the Long Island Regional Planning Council is you have good plans in place, and those good plans will allow us to attract state and federal dollars, I believe.
Okay, thanks, thanks, Kevin. So Rob Calarco, what do you think Long Island's top priorities should be when it comes to securing federal money, or for that matter, even state monies for
So here-
water quality, water infrastructure?
Yeah, Pat, and it's a great question. And so, and we hosted, I hosted an infrastructure forum on this, and the Water Authority participated. I know Ty was there, and I think we all have to pool our resources. And so you have the LINAP plan that's been put forward, and LICAP is out there advocating for how do we, as water users and water providers, take care of our aquifer. And of course, you're also dealing with a lot of the other issues that are out there in terms of treating emergency contaminants. And Adrienne alluded to Calverton. I think someone maybe mentioned the Bethpage bloom. We have issues in West Hampton at the Gabreski Airport. And what all these have in common is they all, their roots of their contamination really go back to the federal government, military institutions, and the defense industry, and its actions in Long Island over the years. So as this infrastructure package is being talked about in the federal government right now, I think we all need to go down there with one voice and say, this is a prime opportunity for the federal government to make it right, to provide us the resources we need so that we can implement the pioneering technologies that the Water Authority has developed on how to treat and eliminate these emerging contaminants from our drinking water sources. How do we make sure that we are connecting those homeowners who are in areas that are not currently on public water and still utilizing private wells, so those people are getting clean, potable drinking water that is being treated and is being tested regularly. And I think this is the time that we speak as one to the federal government and let them know that this is our needs as a region, not to overlook other parts of the country, but we have problems that in some ways they helped cause, and they need to be a part of the solution.
Especially if you live in Bethpage. A lot of that plume comes from the Grumman facilities in Bethpage, building some of the aircraft that's been used to defend our nation. Adrienne Esposito, what would your priorities be for Long Island when it comes to the federal money?
Well, actually, we have a whole campaign on that. Funny you should ask. But it's about expanding sewers where needed and where appropriate. It's also about getting some additional federal money for the septic system change-out program for Nassau and Suffolk County. And it's also about helping pay for the filtration devices, exactly what Rob said, for 1,4-dioxane and the PFAS. As you know, nobody knows better than the Water Authority, but the 1,4-dioxane filtration is expensive. The technology takes a while to get right. But even the technology to treat for the PFOA and PFOS, it's $1 million per wellhead. As some people in the question and answer section who are asking about the Brookhaven landfill and PFAS are saying. So it's expensive. Who's going to pay? Some of this contamination we do trace back to firefighting foam. The Yaphank Training Center, that was a county training center. The Navy plume in Calverton, we know they used it there. B&L used it on their site. Everybody used it. They had no reason not to. So, we think it is the federal government's responsibility to help pay for what the federal government caused. So for us, it's about remediation, technology, infrastructure, both septic and sewers. And that's what we've been doing.
Jackie, what about hooking up those folks who, even here in Suffolk County, are still drinking in private wells in places like Calverton, where there have been traces of these PFOAs, PFOS, other places, 1,4-dioxane, and for them, it's just too costly.
Exactly. But before I get to that, I just wanted to add on, I think timeliness of this is important as well, because even like the plume in Nassau County, it's moving daily, it's growing, and this contamination is getting worse and worse. So the longer we leave it at bay, the larger the cost is going to be to mitigate it. So we need to address it as soon as possible. So hopefully we'll get through something with this bill. But we at the Suffolk County Water Authority, right now about 85% of Suffolk, we cover about 85%, but we are trying and making efforts to get as many folks on board as possible, because it is cheaper if they are a part of the Water Authority. We test way more than we need to. By regulation, and the experts here, I'm not an expert yet, hopefully yet, but I think we, by regulation, we have to test for about 150 contaminants. We test for over 400. And so private wells and private persons and organizations, they just probably can't afford to test that much. So they would be better off and would get better water through the Suffolk County Water Authority. And we also, because we know of the cost and how prohibitive it is to lock into our system, we have created a way for that financially, and we've reduced cost. We have reduced the amount of folks in certain areas that can come into that financial plan. So we're really trying to make it easier for everyone who wants to be able to be a part of Suffolk County Water Authority and to get the best, cleanest, most affordable drinking water that's out there.
And on the subject of clean drinking water, we actually did get a question from the audience about that. Annalise wants to know, what is the county and Suffolk County Water Authority doing to protect our water supply from the Brookhaven landfill and other waste management projects?
Okay, who wants to take that one? Let's go to Tim Kilcommons. Tim, you're out there building our system, responding to contaminants that have shown up in our wells, figuring out how to treat it and keep things moving and keep the water flowing.
Yeah, but
what are your thoughts about that?
But the question
Adrienne,
is specific. Yeah, but the question specifically on Brookhaven, there's like 5 questions in the chat, so we should roll them all in one for Tim. It's specifically on the landfill, and you know, people are asking about the PFOA and PFOS in a Suffolk County water well, which is south of the landfill. So maybe you could address that, Tim, as you address Annalise's question, and also Karam, who's asked several questions in the Q&A. It's the same question, but overall, the quality of water from the landfill or generating from the landfill contamination, and also in that Suffolk County well south of the landfill with regards to PFOA and PFOS.
Yeah, so what I would say about that is that we're testing all the wells, right, for PFCs, for perfluorinated compounds, and where we're finding them and where we're finding concentrations that are half of the MCL of 10 parts per trillion, we're rolling out activated carbon systems, granular activated carbon systems. In terms of the source of those, we've been successful. You had mentioned Calverton before as one area with the government. With the Water Authority over in the West Hampton area, we had Gabreski Airport, and the Air National Guard has actually paid the Water Authority, I believe it's over $2 million to date, on the treatment systems that we had to roll out at 2 of our pump stations in the immediate vicinity, because we could show definitively that that's where it was coming from. So we do track back where we can. Often it's not possible, unfortunately, to see exactly where something was coming from. So in terms of, I don't have an answer in terms of the 1 million, to be recouped from the town of Brookhaven to show it, but the fact is that where we're finding it, we're treating for it. And in some cases, we've been treating for it. That Air National Guard site, we had a mobile GAC system that we created as a rapid response long before this. We had actually
explain what a GAC system is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's granular activated carbon, and that's kind of a go-to filtration system.
How effective is it?
It's extremely effective at removing organic compounds and at removing perfluorinated compounds. And we're learning more about that every day. We actually, when we learned about the Meeting House contamination, Meeting House Road and Quag, that was one of the Air National Guard sites. What we had done is, at the same time, we mobilized this small mobile unit to immediately begin treatment on the system. Before there was an MCL in place, we were already treating for it. So we filled it with carbon. There are different types of carbon that you can use. There's bituminous carbon, think coal mine. There's also coconut carbon, which is used probably in most of your refrigerator filters. And then there are different variants of that, what we call boutique carbons or enhanced carbons. And so what we did was we partnered with North Carolina State University and we ran what they call rapid small-scale column tests to try to predict which carbons would be best so that we could get the longest running carbon, the most effective carbon, and the carbon that was most cost effective as well, because we know this is going to be a long-term deal. It's not just the capital cost that we incur on these things, it's also the operating cost year after year after year. We pay a little over $2 million a year for carbon changeouts now. That's without the 20 GAC units that I've rolled out, that the Water Authority has rolled out over the past year in response to PFCs. So you're probably at $50,000 a load for carbon. You can see where that's going. The operating expenses will continue. But yeah, in answer, it is being tested for. Where we're finding it, we're treating for it. And where we can, we do go back. And we've also initiated lawsuits, right? So the Water Authority is doing everything in its power. And on the federal funding side, to the Calverton.
Before you go on the federal funding side,
Sure.
I just want to ask a point of clarity for those for the participants. Did you say, and I'm sorry, Tim, I just don't know if you said this or not. So the drinking water well, that Suffolk County Water Authority has, that's a little bit south and a little bit lateral to the landfill. Does that have a GAC filtration system on it?
At Station Road, I believe Station Road does have a GAC system on it. Yes.
That's what I need. Thank you.
Thanks, Adrienne, for providing that clarity. Let's provide a little more clarity about the lawsuit. The Suffolk County Water Authority, along with other providers, are suing the chemical companies who are responsible for the PFOAs, the PFOS, and the 1,4-dioxane. Tim, you want to add more to that? We've had some success in the past where we've identified polluters like the MTBE.
Yeah, MTBE was a large one.
Our water supply system when it was added to gasoline.
That's right. And this is along the same vein where we'll figure this out, figure out who's responsible. But in the meantime, we can't wait, right? We need to treat the water. And so we roll it out. And that's the Water Authority has been great at doing that and making the funding available to us. And it is a full-time job now to look to Rob's point, to look for this money, to get help for it. We have $9 million in grants right now for advanced oxidation process to treat for 1,4-dioxane. For some of our sites. We have, for that Calverton site, we're pursuing federal funding to extend water main. That's an area that the Water Authority doesn't currently serve, but certainly we could, and it would take some federal funding to help keep costs down.
Thanks, Tim. Seth, do you have any more questions along these lines?
Sure. So we actually have a couple more questions in here. We had somebody email us a question before the event started that wanted to know about fluoride. I don't know, and fluoride in the Water Authority's water specifically. I don't know.
Let's get an answer. Tim Kilcommons, do we have fluoride?
No, there is no fluoride in Suffolk County Water Authority water.
I know they have it in New York City water.
They do.
Sarah Anka has a good question, Seth.
Yep. Yeah. So Sarah just put one in here. She wants to know, 2 of Long Island's largest sand mining companies in her district have been permitted by the DEC to dredge 150 feet into the groundwater, removing 650 acres of sand. She'd like to know, what is the Water Authority's opinion regarding the concerns with groundwater contamination as they impact reducing our water table due to surface water evaporation?
That is a great question. I'm going to ask Tim Kilcommons to talk about that. I know we recently participated in a conference with the EPA and others on this very topic. Tim?
Well, I know that the Water Authority has a chance to weigh in normally on these projects. And when we do, what we do is we pass it between our operations people. So the people responsible for pumping the water, people like myself responsible for the design of that water supply infrastructure. And then we have a team of hydrogeologists that take a look. And we take a look at where the project is, what the scope of the work is, and then what our actual capture zones. We have mapping and modeling to show us what the actual capture zones of the wells are. And a capture zone is, where is the well actually getting its water from and in what timeline, right? So a capture zone may be as close as a year. For something that maybe is for a shallow well, or it may be 20 years away from us. So in other words, if we're pumping our well at the current rates for 20 years, we could expect to see contamination from a source within that 20-year capture zone at that time. And so
Tim, you've been here a long time.
Yep.
How much more do we know about this, the flow of groundwater to the aquifers to our pump stations today than before?
Oh, it's night and day, and it's growing. USGS right now is still undergoing an entire program to go around and try to figure out the monitoring of groundwater flow, and chlorides for the island. And you know, I believe it started out as a study for Adrienne probably know this better than me, but it started out, I believe, for Western Nassau, but it's actually grown through LICAP to be the entire island, and that's going to be fantastic data for us to be able to mine.
So is it fair to say we know more about our drinking water supply today than ever before? And in 5 years, 10 years, we'll know even a lot more than we know now?
We do, and I think it points to the fact that I think what you're seeing in Bethpage now, where they're actually treating the plume and not just forcing the water supplier to treat it as drinking water after the fact. I think that's really where, you know, some of the best breakthroughs will come in the future for us. You know, Rob talked before about the advanced wastewater treatment systems going in Suffolk. That's fantastic news, because it's much harder to clean up after the fact and much more expensive to clean up after the fact. If we can clean it up or not even put it there in the first place would be the best solution. But if we are going to put it in the water, you know, to have it treated before it goes into the aquifer, certainly that's a much better approach than what we're doing now.
But let me just make a comment about sand mines, Patrick, because you said I should, you know, chime in.
Yeah,
I
please.
want to just support Sarah Anker's, what sounds to me like a concern about what's happening with the DEC giving out like sticks of candy, permits to sand mine down into the deep reaches of our aquifer system, allowing freshwater lakes to occur. Because what could possibly go wrong? You know, the deepest natural lake on Long Island is Lake Ronkonkoma, which is 65 to 90 feet deep. And the DEC is neg decking, meaning no potential environmental impacts, these sand mine operations in your district, Sarah, and others, to go down 150 feet into the aquifer system and create these largest man-made lakes. So we are tremendously concerned. We strongly disagree with this neg deck process that the DEC has and their overwhelming love affair with sand mining and refusing to believe it contaminates groundwater, because the data, particularly on the East End, shows us that it does.
Okay, thanks so much. We also got a question. I saw it pop up on the screen. Somebody asked the question, the Water Authority is charging a fee of $20 per quarter. That works out to about 22 cents a day. Where is that money going? What is the purpose of that? Jackie, I know you supported that. Do you want to talk about the monies that are being invested in the water treatment systems that are now required to meet the state's more rigorous water quality standards for the PFAS and the 1,4-dioxin?
Well, as an retired educator, I am so used to regulation without funding for it. So we have to, you know, we're regulated and we have to be able to test for 1,4-D and PFAS. And so this is a way that we can make sure that the water that we distribute to our ratepayers is the cleanest water, and we can continue the testing. And it's the most unobtrusive way, and that we can continue the testing. So we really deliberated long and hard, and we sent notices out way in advance of when we started this $20 upgrade, and it's $20 per quarter per household. And this way we can maintain the cleanest drinking water. And we thought as a board that it was reasonable.
Thanks, Jackie. Tim Kilcommons, can you talk specifically about how that money is being spent and how much we anticipate spending for these advanced treatment systems? Now, this is Suffolk County wide in various wells.
Yeah, sure. So typically we have an annual capital budget of 65 to $75 million at the Water Authority. So on top of that, we're spending $25 to $26 million a year for 3 or 4 years in order to tackle these emerging contaminant projects. And that's the surcharge money. And what we're doing with that is we're rolling out these advanced oxidation process for 1,4-dioxane. And Adrienne kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. She was talking about how she understands how, they don't basically get rolled out overnight. And there's a reason for that. Part of the reason is there's lots of testing and piloting that has to be done at each individual well. Each well has its own water quality. And it doesn't even matter if there are, 4 wells on the same well site, may each have a different water quality characteristic. And so we have to identify what that is in order to be able to design a system to treat for 1,4-dioxane for it. So we do testing for that. We actually have put together we have a mini AOP reactor, an ultraviolet light reactor, and hydrogen peroxide system that our own in-house team, our electricians, our utility men help outfit an existing trailer we had. We roll that out to each site to test a well. And what we're doing there is we're testing what byproducts are created by advanced oxidation. Advanced oxidation is kind of a unique treatment process here on the island because normally what we do is we completely remove a contaminant through, like the carbon vessels we were talking about before, it adsorbs molecules, right? So it takes those contaminants out of the water. AOP actually smashes the molecule and destroys it. So it's no longer 1,4-dioxane. But the health department, the state wants to know, what are you creating when you smash those molecules? And so we do byproducts testing to see what exactly is being created and whether or not by the way, we have GAC, those carbon filters on the back end or the downstream end of each of those AOP reactors. And that catches anything, including the hydrogen peroxide that's left over in the process. And so these are very complicated systems. They have to work with complicated controls in order to function with the wells to make sure that if there is a problem or if something shuts down, that the well shuts down. We're able to monitor these 24/7 from our SCADA center, or our supervisory control and data acquisition center in Bayshore. We can see things at the site 24/7, 365 days a year. And then, so that's just the AOP side. On the other side, we have the perfluorinated compounds where we're rolling out GACs. And even though we're extremely familiar with GAC systems and how to get them and how to build them, it takes a lot to put them on a site. Often these sites were purchased years ago with the idea that there would just be a couple of wells and some light treatment, like adding chlorine for disinfection purposes. And now we're having to do filtration on them. So we have to get creative with the use of the space. We have to get a lot of site work done. Our forces go in there, our in-house forces go in, they redo yard piping, get everything ready. We have concrete pads to pour, and then we're landing these 20,000-pound vessels and then eventually putting buildings over them. So,
all right, Tim, let's get to the bottom line of the question. We're collecting a lot of money, $20 a customer every 3 months. So that's, let's say 20 times 4 is $80 a year, 22 cents a day. That adds up to a lot of money. When all of this is done based on our current projections, how much will the Water Authority have invested over the course of, let's say, the next 5 to 10 years on these treatment systems?
well,
What's your
over
estimate?
$100 million.
$100 million. Well,
Yeah.
And as Jackie said, if we were waiting for the federal government or we were waiting for the state of New York, it won't be happening. We have a responsibility to provide the highest quality drinking water. That's right up there at our mission statement, and this is what it takes to do that. Let me just ask a different question. We talked a lot about infrastructure and all of that. I want to get John Cameron back into this. As I hope people are getting a sense, we're very, very fortunate to the leaders back 70 years ago who said, we need to have a county-wide water authority, because at that point, Suffolk County had about 140,000 residents county-wide. And of course, we saw the population grow in the 50s and it exploded in the 60s. It exploded in the 70s and 80s. It kind of leveled off since then. But the Suffolk County Water Authority grew along with our population. And it makes sense, right? We need safe drinking water. But in Nassau County, that was not the case. They had the same kind of growth, but there they have, 40 something different little water companies. I keep thinking to myself, how can they manage, these challenges we have today, much less the things that we talked about with dealing with contamination that isn't even in their water district or their territory.
Patrick,
You as a consulting engineering company, I know you do work in this field.
sure.
Looking at it, you think about it. How do we create maybe regional responses, to these challenges in a way that provides economies of the scale we see here at the Water Authority?
It's an excellent point, Patrick. And I think, the balkanization, if you will, of water districts in Nassau County is really emblematic of Long Island. You look at the hundreds of municipal districts we have here and levels of government we have on Long Island here, from, the counties, the towns, the cities, the villages, to actually we have, the libraries, school districts, but also you have elevator districts in Nassau County. And so as a result, you look and say, and I used that analogy earlier about one district allowing contamination to occur and contaminating wells in another district. So the other district actually has the difficulty and the cost of treating that water. We did a study, my firm did a study for Pryor County Executive in Nassau County, looking at consolidation issues. And we looked at it, and frankly, and I brought it up earlier, the Suffolk County Water Authority, there is a major economy of scale. And as a result, you do have one of the lowest water rates, if you will, in the state. And it's one thing, we need to put these things in perspective. We look and say a lot of times in society today, we don't do a good job of really comprehending risk. We also don't do a good job in comprehending relative costs. And you look at how important is water. We look and say it's probably at the top of the list here on Long Island. But you look at it, it's not the top of the list of where we put our money. We put much more of our money in our cable TV bill on a monthly basis. We put more money in our cell phone bill than our drinking water supply. And I was just saying is, what's more important than, a clean, adequate supply, supple supply of water? And when we have balkanization and we have separate districts, it's going to make it much more difficult to actually treat that water and provide a reliable source of water. Tim brought up the issue up in Calverton, and you look and say, or whether it be out in Gabreski. Well, what happens if the water supply is not part of Suffolk County and that district is being contaminated? Oh, you look and you have a number of them contaminated by the Bethpage plume, okay? What happens if you don't have federal infrastructure money, a federal cleanup money? Is that it becomes overwhelming for a local district to pay for that. Regionalization provides the opportunity to do things much more comprehensively and frankly, much more intelligently than doing it on a small case by case basis.
Thanks, John. And by the way, I saw some of the questions that were posted on chat. In the event the Water Authority is successful in getting a substantial settlement with the chemical companies that are responsible for these contaminants, that money will be used to reduce the fee, the $20 quarterly fee. But in the meantime, we needed that cash in order to get the projects moving and knowing that we had sufficient resources. And while our drinking water costs continue to be among the lowest in the nation and here on Long Island, $80 is $80. But Adrienne, people don't think about that when they're buying a bottle of water at their local 7-Eleven. I can't
Sorry, I
hear
was
you.
muted. Damn, I wasn't supposed to mute. When people say, look, it's $80, I get it. I am working class. And I understand that that's real money and it's valuable. But also I do understand that clean water isn't free. It just doesn't come out of the tap and it's magically filtered. And that would be great. We live on an island with 3 million people. We all live on top of our groundwater. We have industry and polluters and legacy waste, and it's work. So I think of it of $80 as an investment of funds, not necessarily an expenditure of funds. And also I appreciate you saying, publicly, Patrick, that look, if you win the lawsuit, or I think when you win the lawsuit, because I think at some point there's going to be a settlement, that money comes back to the public. So I think that's, another long-term investment is fighting these these companies. I happen to know some of them are very nervous about this lawsuit. They've reached out and told me that. And I think that, you know, we will get our day in court. We, the public, you, the water suppliers. But, you know, clean water is not free.
And Kevin, I want to ask you about the importance of water and economic development. We see it, as I mentioned before, I saw this report, this interesting documentary I recommended about the water wars in California. There, as you know, they do have aquifers, but they're not replenished with the volume of rainwater that we get every year. Most of that water goes for agriculture. A big part of that water goes for agriculture. Here, we don't have to make those choices as to who uses the water. Obviously, agriculture in California is a big economic driver, but there are neighboring communities right adjacent to these big mega farms that don't have potable water. Will that be an ongoing economic concern in places like Long Island? And Kevin, I'd like to get your thoughts. I'd like to get John Cameron's, and then I'd like to get Tim Kilcommons on that.
Sure, Pat. Yeah, I'll say it again. Our environment is our economy. If we destroy our environment, if we destroy our groundwater here, you know, we could kiss our economy goodbye. We could kiss all our house values goodbye, and businesses aren't going to want to stay here or locate here. We need to protect our environment. It's critical. We need to protect our groundwater. And, you know, Adrienne used a term before. We used it 30 years ago when we convinced voters to tax themselves on the sales tax.
Right.
We said this would be an investment. Yes, it was a tax, but it was an investment that we would be protecting our groundwater resource for the future. So one, we wouldn't have to try to, you know, we wouldn't have to do what New York City did. And, you know, they have all upstate reservoirs. People forget that Brooklyn and Queens once used groundwater. You know, they're all on Long Island, and they can't obviously do that anymore. And that would be terrible if we couldn't do that someday. And so I think these steps, whether it's the quarter-cent sales tax to protect Pine Barrens, or this surcharge or fee that you guys put on, you know, the water bills, they need to be sold and educated to our constituents as investments, and they're needed. And something else I just want to tap on to dovetail on something John said to your previous question, Pat, in terms of regional efforts. There are certain things that don't lend themselves to you know, a regional approach, like the new sector I'm in now in terms of housing and multifamily housing, affordable housing. That's more localized, and you need to work with the local community and the local village or the local town to move those projects along. But there are certain issues that lend themselves to regional efforts or regional initiatives. You know, energy, for instance, and that's why we have a Long Island Power Authority. Transportation, you know, that's why we have a Long Island Railroad. You know, like the business group, the Long Island Association, our economy, we have one regional, you know, economy. And certainly when it comes to groundwater doesn't respect municipal boundaries, whether it's county boundaries, town or village boundaries. And so if there's one big environmental initiative that really would go towards strengthening our region and our economy, is having a regional approach to water. And that's what you guys do so well in Suffolk County. And to the extent you help provide services to parts of Suffolk County that aren't in your jurisdiction, or even into Nassau County, that makes sense from an environmental perspective. It also makes sense from an economic perspective.
Well, one of the things that we do here at the Water Authorities is in some cases, small little water districts such as St. James and Smithtown, they no longer operate their own wells. They're just not able to do that. It's too costly. So the Water Authority sells wholesale water to them. And that is a big savings to their ratepayers, but it also avoids millions of dollars in infrastructure costs and operating costs that they would otherwise have. Jackie, you remember when the Suffolk County Water Authority, and you were on the town board in Babylon, was asked by the town of Babylon, by the town board you served on, to operate the East Farmingdale Water District.
Absolutely. And we work closely with Suffolk County Water Authority for them to take over that well. And we worked with the community and they were on board as well, because just like our mission states, the objective is to bring clean water at an affordable price. And those ratepayers in that area in East Farmingdale, they realized that it wasn't sustainable anymore and they weren't able to do it on their own. So we came in and it was really a seamless transition, and the Water Authority was so professional. It was easy. They had meetings with the community so that they knew exactly what was going to happen and how the transition was going to take place. And so this is what we would like to happen in other communities, and so that we can provide the cleanest, safest drinking water at the most affordable prices.
Thanks, Jackie. Hey, Tim Kilcommons, I remember there was a contaminated well that was in the process of being rebuilt just south of Republic Airport, north of the Southern State Parkway. And in order to assure that there was enough water, we brought a water main into that area. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we did. We actually we did a horizontal directional drill underneath the Southern State Parkway, a 16-inch main that we brought across to help feed that area, to make sure that there was enough water to go around in that area. So yeah, sometimes you have to get creative. And, we're fortunate on Long Island. We have a lot of good contractors who are skilled on top of our in-house personnel, and we were able to get that done.
But you designed it.
Right.
Go ahead, Jackie.
A well had collapsed, and it was something like that had happened when they finally said they needed to. We convinced them to bring in the Water Authority, and we helped facilitate that.
So, so let me work back to John Cameron. John, you work for water districts, mostly in Nassau County. You work for developers. How often does the question of whether or not that little water district has enough water based on their current infrastructure to meet that new development, whether it be a residential or commercial? Is that an issue that comes up on a fairly regular basis?
Patrick, it's unfortunately it's not brought up enough, because in particular, and Adrienne's brought up, and Tim has also, we talk about this where Nassau County is operating on a negative water budget. It's drawing out of the aquifer every day more than it's putting back in. Suffolk, the reverse is true. And so we have in Nassau County, as you know, we've had issues of contamination. You have saltwater contamination, and Tim's brought it up. We have it on, the South Shore, like the Long Beach community, and then also up in the North Shore communities. We've had saltwater intrusion. In fact, even on the western areas of Nassau County, in order to try and minimize the cost of producing clean water, they've actually had discussions with the city of New York about possibly bringing water over from New York City, which New York City, gets from the Croton Reservoir upstate. They actually have an excellent water supply, and they're looking at actually marketing and possibly selling water. And you look and say, is it not worth our while from a regional perspective? We always look, say, Long Island. We don't typically include Brooklyn and Queens. We're Nassau and Suffolk. Okay, we tend to be very Nassau and Suffolk centric. Why shouldn't we be looking at a regional perspective, as Kevin's alluded to, in treating and dealing with our water supply? There is nothing more fundamental. You ask everybody in Long Island, we complain about high taxes, high energy costs, but we're just talking about here. Fortunately and unfortunately, our water supply is a low-cost item. But we start having contamination issues here. We're gonna have quantity issues in a number of districts. We should be looking at a macro perspective, and I believe that the model of the Suffolk County Water Authority has great applicability for Long Island, and we should be studying that, even if you're not looking to take over different districts, but being able to offer what you provide, in particular with regard to a supply of a clean water for Long Island should definitely be explored.
Well, Rob Calarco, I'm in this job because of you and your colleagues. You do give us a 5-year, we do get a 5-year term. By the way, just as background, the Suffolk County Water Authority is a state authority that was created back when the Board of Supervisors was there and the county legislature didn't exist. and the Board of Supervisors would appoint the members of the board. And now, of course, the county legislature does. What are your thoughts about regionalization?
Well, I mean, here's the thing about it, Pat. What you guys are able to do in the Suffolk County Water Authority, because you serve such a great area, is you are able to maximize your resources, but you're also able to divert resources when necessary. When there is a well that has a issue, whether you find an emerging contaminant in it and you need to shut it down, you're able to divert water from other sources, and you're able to kind of manage that water level so that we're trying to stay at a constant pace, which you don't get when you're in these multiple little districts, and they're constantly competing against each other, and you don't get the economies of scale. And I think it's something that we really need to look at. And now I don't want to opine for what's right for Nassau County as a Suffolk County legislator, but it is really that regional approach that you need to take. And I know in Suffolk County, we have multiple sewer districts, and we are doing the studies now to determine whether or not it makes sense to have one consolidated sewer district that looks at overarching, how do we deal with our wastewater that's going out, so that we're dealing with it as one problem. And again, I'm from upstate New York. We had a sewer and water district. It did it both, and you paid for both at the same time. These are things that we really need to look at as a region, because what we are taking out of the water, out of the ground for our water uses, and what we put back in from afterwards, it all ties together. It's all part of a cycle. And the more the regional approach, the higher elevation you look and how you manage that cycle, the better you're going to be able to do that.
Okay, thanks, Rob. I want to just shift to another topic and talk about water conservation. This is the summer. This is the time of year when most people use their most water, sprinkling their lawns, watering their lawns. And Tim Kilcommons, give us an overview of, or give us a sense of what the impact is of water sprinkling during the months of May, June, July, August, and even into parts of September.
Sure. If we have water talks where we go around, we talk to different community groups and give them an idea of how the system operates. And
by the way, we do have one coming up. We have a water talk community forum, which is going to focus on the greater West Hampton. And that's going to be on July 21st. So thank you for bringing that up. I was told to make sure they could go right to our SCWA website.
I was told to remind you. So there you go.
Okay, thank you very much, Tim. Go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things we do at the Water Talk is we show a graph that is kind of jaw-dropping on the difference between winter demand, which is essentially just the water you use in your house, right? For showering, for cooking, for flushing toilets, versus summer demand. And so we know that we can attribute that use to irrigation systems, because that's the big difference factor, right? You're watering your lawns in those summer months. And it's anywhere from 2 to 4 times, what the average winter demand is. It's really mind-boggling. And as engineers, we have to design our system to meet those peak demands, and not just meet the peak irrigation demand, but still be able to provide fire protection on top of that. So that's the challenge for us, when it comes to summertime. And that's why conservation is such an important part of the issue in both saving the water itself and in the time of day that the water is being used. And so we try to educate the customers on that and do both. And then the board has implemented a 2-tier rate, or a conservation rate here. And so I think now we're charging $2.12 or something for the first 1,000 gallons or per 1,000 gallons. And if you go past the threshold into the conservation rate, it skyrockets to $3.06, which is, when people start to notice, take a look at your bill and you can see that, hey, there's a need for this. And it's not just a way of saying, hey, we're going to collect the revenue on this, although we will. It's also a way of opening a dialogue with customers who may not have been willing to have it in the first place. And so the Water Authority has sent staff members out to talk to our largest users. We have a WaterWise Club for conservation, where we'll give a $50 credit for people for using water saving devices. And we'll also meet one-on-one with homeowners to go over and do a water audit in the home and show them ways that they can save.
Hey, Tim, how much does it cost when we have a situation where the water pressure goes down, the supply isn't sufficient to meet the demand? I know we had a problem like that. by Southampton Hospital, where they have those big estates, and all the water sprinklers would go on. And we were concerned that we would lose water pressure. What does that mean if we lost water pressure? And what did it take for the water authority to provide sufficient water so that doesn't happen?
Yeah, so losing water pressure, we have health department guidelines we have to meet. We have to maintain, they like to see 30 pounds of pressure in the water main at all times. And part of the reason for that is so you don't get any backflow. You know, if you have a 2 or 3 story building, there's pressure put on from those upper stories that could actually push water back into the system. We have ways of mitigating that where we can block it at our meters and things like that. The other thing, though, like I said before, is fire protection. And that's really the biggest thing. You know, the worst case scenario is during peak demand, during those overnight hours when everybody has their sprinklers going at the same time, because, you know, maybe they haven't implemented odd even though we're, you know, water suppliers have been asking for that. You get a fire event and the fire department hooks up to a hydrant and they don't have the flow from that hydrant. And that just can't happen. We can't allow that to happen. And so what we do is we provide additional supply. And that could be for us because we're such a large system. It could be opening up. We consist of different pressure zones. It could be those pressure zones are connected, so we could flow more water from one zone to another. We could end up having to do new supply, putting in a new well. A new well in certain parts of the island can cost just the well alone over $1 million in capital money. That's without the pump station. We still need to build a chem treatment building. We still need power and all that to go with it, and maybe treatment on top of that. You know, so a pump station, you're looking at anywhere from $2 to $5 million. So then,
what about a large water main? We brought a large water main into the West Hampton area recently.
Yeah,
how much is that a foot or a mile?
So that can, depending on the road that we're in, that can be anywhere from $100 to $250 a foot for water mains. And the other thing we're doing, because this is always a balancing act, right? We need more supply, but we don't necessarily want to take it from the aquifer all at the same time, because that has a deleterious effect on water quality. And we talked about saltwater intrusion quite a bit. And so what we're doing now is you see us building storage tanks. We built a 2 million gallon storage tank out in Laurel on a North Fork. We have a 900,000 gallon tank we put into service last year at Cross Highway out in Amagansett. And we're proposing a 2 million gallon tank in Wainscott on Town Line Road. And what that allows us to do is we can fill those tanks during non-peak hours. So sipping very slowly from the aquifer, not much disturbance there. And then at peak times, we can pump the Laurel Lake tank, we can pump over 1,000 gallons a minute at peak time to add to it. So it's like having additional wells.
Sure is. Tim, I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm getting told that Seth has got a lot of good information for us regarding some of the surveys that you've seen pop up on the screen. So Seth, I want to turn it over to you.
Sure, Patrick. So we've been doing some poll questions during today's panel. Do you drink tap or bottled water? We do get 87% of people saying, responding, saying that they drink the tap water. So I think that's important. I wanted, before we wrap up, I wanted to get to just a couple of water quality questions really quickly, just so people have the accurate information that they need. Mina was asking if the water authority is testing the actual water in the water main in the street as it's piped out to people. So Tim, if you want to kind of tackle that about sample stations and explain how we do test that water. And then just to piggyback off that, access to the public about all of our testing results, those are available at scwa.com. Absolutely.
Tim?
Yeah, sure.
Where do we test?
So we test in multiple places. We do test in the distribution system. We have sampling stations, over 300 of them spread out throughout our system. And we sample what's actually in the water mains going into the customer homes. We also sample at what we call the head of the pump. So we sample the water directly as it comes out of the ground. If we have treatment installed, we'll sample after the treatment so we can compare what's at the head of the pump and what's the treated water looks like. And then, like I said, we're testing again at the, we may be testing one more time within the station, and then we're testing our tanks, our storage tanks, to make sure that the water quality is remaining good in those and out in the distribution system.
And we test more often for more things.
Yeah,
than anybody else.
as Jacqueline said before, we're testing for over 400 contaminants when we're asked to test for 150 or so.
Okay, and more often. I know we test our system once a month. The state and federal government only requires what, once a quarter?
I believe that's correct. And then there are other guidelines that have us testing quarterly.
Let's get back to water conservation. Adrienne, there are these smart meters, smart sprinkler systems that not only measure the amount of water you're using and whether or not it rained the night before, but also the humidity in the air. And we're finding that that significantly reduces the amount of water that's wasted for watering lawns.
Listen, I'm a big proponent. CCE is a big proponent. We actually worked with the Water Authority and the other water districts out in Nassau to promote smart meters. It makes no sense, both environmentally, but also economically, to be watering your lawn in the middle of a rainstorm. I just don't get it. So the smart meters are, in fact, they're smart. They know when it's raining. They know when there's a lot of moisture. And they're saying you don't need to water your lawn. Don't waste your money. Don't waste the water. So I really, to me, a smart meter should be part of every new development on Long Island. It should be a routine new part of development or any particular remodel. They're inexpensive and they save money on your water bills and save water. I love them.
Yeah, we just have a comment from one of our viewers who said the simplest way to save money is not to water your lawn. And I remember as a kid, back when kids actually cut the grass, my mother would have me out there with the hose and a sprinkler that went around and around and around because we wanted a green lawn. But I can tell you by mid-July and August, it was brown because there's no way you could keep up. And obviously our water bill wasn't as high as it might have been if we had underground sprinklers. But of course, I'm old. They didn't have underground sprinklers then. Look, we have run out of time, believe it or not. I was concerned that we wouldn't have enough things to talk about over the course of about 90 minutes. But we've certainly met that and more. And I want to really thank our panel. You've been terrific. This has been an important discussion. Maybe we should do something like this more often, but I do appreciate you participating in this panel discussion, celebrating our 70 years. I know we're excited about hitting our 100th anniversary. I won't be here then, but the way Jacqueline and I and all the people at the Water Authority think about it, our job is not to think about what we need today, although we spend a lot of time on that, but is to make sure that future generations of our customers and residents of Suffolk County have the highest quality drinking water possible. And those of us on the board realize that is our responsibility, and we take it very seriously every day. And before we go, I want to mention it again. There's going to be a Water Talk Community Forum. It'll be held virtually on July 21st. That'll focus on the greater West Hampton area, but it's open to everyone. And a lot of the topics that we've talked about will be discussed. So it's not just about West Hampton, it's really about the whole region. And finally, make sure to follow SCWA on Facebook and Twitter. And don't forget to follow us and subscribe to the SCWA podcast, What About Water? It is a very interesting podcast. It is well produced. It is thoughtful. It's creative. We have Seth out on the street asking questions of our residents. One of them is where the water comes from. We got a lot of very interesting comments on that, but it's our way of making sure that the people of Long Island have a sense that learn more about where their water comes from and the role that water suppliers like Suffolk County Water Authority and others play every day in their lives. So I want to thank you all for watching. I appreciate it. Thank you for participating. I'm Pat Halpin, the chairman of the Water Authority. Maybe we'll see you again next time.